Hello and welcome to the Business Spotlight Series. I'm Coach Mark with Action Coach Bluegrass. I am the CEO and Master Coach for us here, based out of Louisville, Kentucky. And today we're going to be talking with Britt, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Epic Brands, who represent a lot of awesome restaurants in the area. I'll let him tell you more about that. Today we're going to be talking with him about the business, their journey, their challenges, best practices, and anything else that comes to our minds. If this is your first time watching one of our podcasts, please subscribe so that you don't miss any of the future ones. So Chris, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so why don't you go ahead and give us kind of a brief overview of Epic Brands, how it came about, how you got involved in kind of your journey there, and what the business looks like today and the different concepts you've got going.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a rambler, so I'll try to keep my answers concise and quick to the point. But Epic Brands was founded pretty much with Agave and Rye, right, in February of 2018, our first location in Covington, Kentucky, in a small little 2,000 square foot location right across the river. We're still to this day founded by a husband and wife, Yavonne and Wade Sarber. I had met them in Columbus, Ohio. I had gone to Ohio State. Go Bucks for any Ohio State fans listening, but had met them in 2016 and had worked my way up to being a GM of one of their restaurants in Columbus, Ohio. They had 3 downtown at that time, a gourmet burger location where I was GM of, and a fine dining location called De Novo, and an Italian location called Manifesto. Back then, we didn't know what we were doing, and we call it Old Co. It was kind of a lack of structure, lack of enforcement, accountability, policies and procedures, pumped out great food, provided some good service, but running a restaurant is different than operating a business, right? You see that all the time. So Wade and Yvonne had hired a restaurant coach out of Texas, and he flew up and said, you need to close this down and start over. So they sold Oliver's, where I was at, and closed De Novo in the winter of 2017. They had begun working on the concept of Agave and Rye, right? Known for epic tacos. Then obviously with the name Agave and Rye, a heavy, large selection of tequila and bourbon. So cool story. They had, after we had closed in Columbus, Wade and Yvonne we really didn't have any money, right? So they took a U-Haul of old restaurant equipment and furniture and $1,200 to their name and over $20,000 in debt, and took a giant gamble and a risk on opening up this new concept in Covington called Agave and Rye. And like I said, February of 2018, no thoughts of expansion, right? Wade was going to run the back, Yvonne was going to run the front, and that's what they were going to do for the rest of their life. The good news is it took off, and they had talked me coming from Columbus down to Kentucky. I initially didn't make the move with them right when they started, because selling tacos and tequila in Kentucky sounded crazy at the time, right? And especially with everything we had gone through in Columbus, I wasn't ready for that move yet. However, stayed in touch every day. And Yvonne, when you trust and respect and love the people you work for, it makes these career-changing decisions a lot easier. So I decided to pack up and move down and be GM of that initial location in Covington. And it took off from day one, right? I said it was small square footage. So we were on an hour, 2-hour waits every night. Guests were loving the food. You've been to the one in Louisville, and no one else kind of does what we do when it comes to the taco, right? That's the vessel for a scratch-made kitchen. And we have many options of that, in addition to, regular food that you can't get anywhere else as well. And like I said, all scratch-made. So super big hit from there. And they had decided to expand about a year in. We had a gentleman who came in with his family frequently and wanted to sit down with Wade and Yvonne about investing and scaling the brand. And they kept saying, no, we don't want to do this, right? We've had multiple locations before. We've learned our lessons. This is what we want to do. But eventually they sat down, they made an agreement, and he joined the brand as a silent financial partner. Very little money back then with store one. Looking back now, it's like, that was a deal. But that kind of helped us get that foot on the gas to scale. And beginning in a year and 2 months, 3 months later, we opened our second location in Lexington, Kentucky, at the Fayette Mall there. And we used our investor to fund that one. And then our third location in Liberty Center, Ohio, he funded half of that. And we've self-funded ever since. And now we're up to 16 Agave and Rye locations in 5 states. We have added a steakhouse called SOB Steakhouse in Liberty Center. Between Dayton and Cincinnati, we did that about a year and a half ago. And then last week, we actually opened our third concept in the brand called Trashy Dawg, which is a epic chicken and booze room. So tenders, shakes, wings, some sliders, more in the QSR realm. So we have full service, fine dining, and now quick service. And Yavonne, our creative genius behind the curtain, has many more ideas in the works. And we're excited to see what the journey lies ahead.
Awesome. So as COO, what's your job? What keeps you busy?
Yeah, busy's a good word, but it's exciting, right? Like I said, I was GM of that initial location. Then I moved to GM of our third location in Liberty Center because we take over second generation buildings, right? That's the kind of the way to go nowadays. And once we opened Liberty Center, we knew we had something special because it was booming, like doubling the sales of Covington and Lexington, our first 2 locations. So I quickly pulled out of that to oversee all of store operations at that point, right? It was just Yavonne and me from the start, even dating back to the Columbus days. So I've kind of been her right-hand man. We kind of balance each other out on how fast do we need to move, the constructive criticism and feedback on where we're at. So right before Louisville, our 4th location, which opened 2 weeks before COVID, I had overseen I was in charge of all the operations of all the store. We didn't have HR at that time. We didn't have marketing at that time. We didn't have a finance department really internally at that time, facilities and maintenance department. We didn't have any of that. So we did it all, right? Which is a great experience from starting from a mom and pop-esque, right? And growing the brand. You dabble in everything and learn everything. And you really get to develop that knowledge that you wouldn't have if you were just transplanting from one company to another, right? And we've never done this before. So it's a lot of lessons learned along the way. And I think that's the best advice anyone can give you, is learning from your own mistakes. So now I like I said, I was oversee those 4 stores. We've grown relatively quickly. And so in my role, I'm still kind of Yvonne's right-hand man because she's basically CEO, co-founder, right? But I pretty much oversee all facets of the restaurant industry, all the departments other than HR. We hired our first CPO, Chief People Officer, I think it's about 6 months ago. So we have Katie, she does great with her team and recruiting and HR and compliance, right? As you grow, you definitely have to be compliant because what you thought was the right way or the legal way sometimes at the beginning is not correct, especially being in 5 states with different taxes and different laws. It kind of gets a little crazy. So I oversee marketing, IT, training, food and beverage, culinary, day-to-day store operations, and dabble pretty much in everything, in charge of assisting with our scalability and our growth.
People outside of the area don't realize what a foodie group that lives around here. It's not just the bourbon in Louisville and the beer in Cincinnati, right? It's a big foodie nation around here and lots of restaurants. So what makes your restaurants so special? The ones I've been to are always busy all the time. What is that, that brings people there and keeps them coming back?
Yeah, I think it's very important for restaurant groups or businesses in general, right, to know who you are. You can't be everything to everybody, and we're not. We play a funky playlist. We have crazy artwork. We have catchy t-shirts in addition to our amazing food you can't get anywhere else, and our scratch made margaritas that are hand squeezed every day. But we pride ourselves in providing an escape, right, from the mundane world, so to speak, and taking in the human element. A lot of groups, I think it's just transactional, right? I'm a manager, I have my team, I am not getting to know them on a personal level, that human basis. And a lot of people don't do that because it's more challenging, it's more difficult, right? Because once you have that human relationship that you've built with your team, sometimes it's harder to hold that team accountable, right? With the sympathy versus empathy debate. But we pride ourselves, our promise to provide an epic experience to our team members, our guests, and community. And you have to do all 3 of those. And every company has, a slogan or a mission statement or whatever. But usually if you talk to employees, we call them team members, they're like, yeah, they say these things, but the company doesn't really do them, right? we live, sleep, and eat our core values: love, respect, inspire, community, exceed expectations, and epic hospitality. That's the foundation, right? Every decision we make is based on that and allowing us to fulfill our dream, right? Which is to provide opportunities to our team members so they can reach their full potential in life and realize their own personal dream, whether that's with us or not with us. It's our job to impact the world and impact people so it becomes a better place. And I think once you get that, establish that culture, and it all starts with people. Once you establish that culture, you can feel that when you enter into our restaurants, right? We've all entered restaurants where like, oh, something's off here. And it's hard, don't get me wrong. But you also feel like when it's right? When the host greets you with a smile and a greeting instead of looking down and saying, just two, right? That personal dynamic with our guests as well has really allowed us to scale. You have to have the buy-in from your team. And the good thing about starting small and growing relatively quickly, and our store 2 is in 2019, right? So that means we've added 16 stores in 4 years. So we've scaled pretty quickly, and never losing sight what got us to where we're at and what got us to be successful. A lot of times when you scale and you get big, you forget the basics, you forget the details, you forget it's all about the people, right? Now we probably have 30 salaries probably outside of working in the stores. Mm-hmm. You see this a lot in business where if it wasn't for those people, we'd all be unemployed because all the money is literally made inside the 4 doors of the restaurants, right? The corporate team, we call it the beehive, right? We don't generate any revenue. Let's make sure the people who, work those long shifts, work those long hours and have to deal with people 12 hours a day, the team and the guests, right? People businesses aren't easy because you're dealing with different personalities, and understanding that, I think, has allowed our guests to feel like they can come in and forget temporarily about what's going on in the real world. We all have issues, right? Financial issues, car issues, family issues, pet issues, kid issues, on and on and on. You have to understand that everybody is going through issues and challenges, but it's okay, right? It's okay to make people happy and smile, because if you're going through issues and you make someone else happy, that's going to make you happy, right? And understanding what you're going through might be minuscule compared to what your guests are going through. And they decided, the good thing about the restaurant industry, right? It's different than retail, right? Once you go to a restaurant, right, your guests plan on spending money. So they've chose, to your point, there's tons of restaurants around in all of our markets. So take care of them, their family. They decided to come out, wait an hour, and spend, 20, 40, 50, $100 here and tip and provide money to you. So understanding that, how important that epic hospitality part of it is. And it's difficult in restaurants today with the costs, right? The skyrocketing of labor and food, you can't cut what matters most. And that's the people, and the people allowing them to be their true authentic self, to take care of others. And that's kind of been our model thus far. And it's so far so good.
So, you opened your second location in 2019, and then 2020, the world changed.
Yeah.
And particularly hospitality. So how did you get through that? How did you come out the other end of that in a position to do the massive expansion you've done since then?
Yeah. And, I think COVID was, I don't want to say a blessing to us, because that's a bad word to use with such a terrible pandemic, but I think COVID allowed us to look in the mirror and realize we had something special, right? We were only in Ohio and Kentucky at that time, 3 stores in Kentucky and 1 in Ohio. And, it was back-to-back days that the state governments told us to shut down, and we didn't see it coming. We probably should, but we didn't. So we paused for a couple of weeks, and then Kentucky allowed carry out. Right. So we decided, okay, let's run a limited menu and see how this goes in Covington, our first location first. And we were doing more sales through carryout than we were doing pre-pandemic with dine-in, right? So I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So let's do this at our other 3 stores. And we did, and it was the same effect, right? Guests, like I just mentioned, were choosing to spend their money with us during maybe the worst time of a lot of their lives, right? And why? Our food's delicious and scratch made, but I think people like spending money where they are relatable to, right? We call ourselves a love brand because we get that human, I mentioned that human connection, where if something goes wrong, they don't get angry or upset. They're more sad and disappointed, right? Because they want us to succeed because they feel they're a part of our success. And with that, we're so small back then, smaller, and that kind of made us realize, okay, let's expand. Let's continue to do what we're doing best, right, during this pandemic, so we can continue to provide more of these opportunities to communities that don't have an escape like we do, or can go out and get an epic experience. And so we regrouped, put some plans together, and we opened up 5 locations between 2020 and early 2021. And going to train with the mask on, going to have the sanitizer and all the precautions. Team members getting COVID and figuring out what to do with that, and still being able to provide our promise to our guests. And sales skyrocketed during COVID with the carryout. And then when the states allowed us to open up our doors again for dine-in, and the weird little 33% rule when you had to put the plexiglass and stuff that made zero sense. But, we did what we were told, and guests understood, right? They know what we were going through. And I think there was more sense of hospitality during COVID, right? Because everyone understood that it was hard. Everyone was experiencing COVID at the same time. You knew what everybody was experiencing. And so I think it gave people an opportunity to understand and reset maybe their perception of kind of the world, or how important those social relationships are. And we don't know how long we're going to be here on this earth. So let's be nice to one another. And that kind of worked for us. And we had very little turnover during COVID, right? When that happened, all the food in our walk-ins, we gave out to our team members to feed them and their families. We allowed them to come in on their off days, and we would feed them as well. We started an employee relief fund to provide resources as much as possible to our team, right? Self-funding, there's not that much. Operational cash flow is minimal because it keeps going in and out. And when COVID hit, we had just enough money to pay that next week's payroll, that biweekly payroll. So we had to be very cautious, right? But like I said earlier, the reason I came down, that trust and respect of Yavonne and Wade, our team earned the trust and respect of our team members as well. And they decided they wanted to be a part of our journey and continue the success we've had. And looking back, it's been successful.
What's been your biggest challenge that you've had to work through post-COVID?
I think it's the scalability part of our brand. And you see that all the time. Great concepts scale very quickly, as we did. A lot of them have private equity, which makes it a little easier, or lines of credit. But, the scalability part is difficult because you're bringing so many people on in a quick period of time, and for them to understand the buy-in and the true meaning, the history of the brand, and what got where we originated to where we're at now, never losing sight of that. That's sometimes difficult for an outsider, right? And as you scale like we've done, you want to promote internally as much as you can, right? Because those are the core, those are who have got you here. But sometimes you don't want to move a server to a leader of the house role, which is what we call a standard GM, because each restaurant is a house in theory, right? And they're the leader of that house. But to understanding the importance of the day-to-day operations, when there's less, I don't want to say less oversight, but maybe less of the brand, the people who originally created the brand in the stores, right? And understanding, getting those that weren't part of that original challenge and that the success, to understand how important it is to live by our core values, our promise and our dream, and take care of each other. And making sure, because we're about 1,500 team members now, so that flow down, top down, bottom up mentality, right? A lot of times it's clogged in the middle, right? We don't understand what's necessarily happening in the stores, and the stores aren't getting the explanation or the why behind a maybe new policy or a menu change or whatever it may be, right? A lot of times it gets clogged right there in the middle, and a lot of people don't realize that until it's too late. But we focus a lot on emotional intelligence, and self-awareness is probably the top thing right there for EQ. And if we see something, we pivot very quickly. It's super important that you pivot quickly and ensure that you're properly communicating to the team everything top down for all the departments. I mentioned earlier was just, Yvonne and I running all the departments. Now we have department heads, and some of them have assistants or specialists that work under them, and to get that cohesion, right, and that buy-in, so all the departments are communicating correctly to the stores, right? If you're scaling, you're on a bus, and say every tire represents a department or a store, If say marketing, for example, is moving slowly and not ahead of getting what they need for the strategic goal of the business, right? You're slowing down that bus. What's the adage? You're only as strong as your weakest link, right? So you can only move as fast as your slowest growing department or store. So that's been a challenge. And like I mentioned earlier, right, the running the restaurant part versus operating a business. The restaurant industry is unique where you give and we're pretty young, we're a young brand, right? You give a 32-year-old, say, the keys to a $3.5 to $5 million business, right? And say, here you go. This is and I think having the leadership at the stores and even the district leadership, the glue in the middle that holds everything together, understand that you're not in charge of a $5 million restaurant. You're in charge of a $5 million business, right? Most people that work in the restaurants and leadership, right, they grew up through the ranks, whether in the kitchen or a server or a bartender or a dishwasher or whatever it may be. So they know how restaurants should run, but they don't know how businesses should operate. That's a challenge for us, is to understand, or how do you coach that or teach that, right? They don't want to look at spreadsheets and financials. They don't have an IT background. They don't know this. So making sure they firmly understand the tools and resources at their disposal, and not necessarily where they're at, but how to use them, right? A lot of people or companies, everything's documented. There's a resource for everything. They know where to get it. They just don't know how to use it. And if they don't know how to use it, they just give up and they try to figure it out their own way. And usually it's the incorrect way. And that's a challenge to us. Our goal is to create the framework for each of our locations based on our core values and structure that empowers the teams that work inside those stores to make the decisions. It's our job to reduce complexity and create clarity for the teams so they can thrive and be themselves and don't have to think too much. They already know they've been properly trained to succeed. Easier said than done, especially with the turnover in the restaurant industry. But if we do those things, and we like to say team togetherness, assert accountability. Accountability is very difficult in this industry because it's not necessarily black and white. There's a lot of gray. We like to say trim the fat and minimize the gray. A lot of companies grow too fast. They hire too many people. That corporate overhead gets too big. And then nobody really is working cohesively as a team. So it creates a lot of unknown or doubt or lack of clarity at the store level or the team member level, which then increases the gray area where bad decisions usually happen because there's too much unknown. So we like to do that. And we say verify value, right? Our number one, our core values, verify that our team is living to that. That's kind of our handbook, so to speak. We have an actual one, but our handbook for success is our core values. We have core value cards that we require our team members to wear, to have in their pocket, one side in English, one side in Spanish, because a lot of our kitchens are heavily Latino. They're part of our team too. You see that divide from the house, back of the house. It's a challenge, but we work heavily to make sure everyone's working in a symbiotic relationship.
Right.
And then verify value, meaning to make sure our team members feel valued. They feel valued only if they feel listened to, not heard, but listened to, right? And that's sometimes difficult when you're dealing with a younger demographic of, 18 to 30 a lot of times, and growing up in the age of social media and that lack of social connection. And it's difficult to sometimes provide that hospitality that we focus so heavily on. But that's what gets us out of bed every day. The challenges of running a business and providing these experiences to our guests and team, knowing the challenges are going to come. Our plan A is always the plan for plan B, because every day is not going to go as scheduled, and understanding the challenges that come with it and working quickly to resolve those so our team does feel valued and appreciated, I think is super important.
Right. Well, we've covered a lot today. And for those of you watching, I really encourage you to bookmark this one and come back and really rehear the lessons on culture and how you integrate your culture into your business. And the leadership team there's had to do this 16 times at 16 locations. And it's clearly working. A lot of really good lessons on how to use core values and how to build culture. So I really appreciate you sharing those, Chris. So to wrap us up, we got just a few quick questions. So what is the key to success for you?
I like to say, be an owl, right? Sometimes we go around the room and what animal would you be, right? Mm-hmm. And I always tell people, leadership, especially those that want to grow, is to be an owl. Research owls, they sit back, they listen, They don't speak very often. They listen, they absorb that information, which creates their wisdom, right? And they're very self-aware of themselves and their surroundings. And we like to say epic is in the details. The smallest thing can make the biggest difference. And just being aware of yourself first, and then being aware of your surroundings, and just sit back, listen to your team, see what's working, what's not working, and make sure they feel valued, heard, and listened to. And that, if you promise that you're going to do something or get back with them, you have to do what you say you're going to do, right? Kind of similar to our core values that I mentioned earlier, that if you're a company that's small or big, doesn't matter, you must do what you say you're going to do to your team, or else they're not going to care and do what is most important to the brand and to the business, which is take care of the guest or the consumer.
What's one book that you're either reading now or you've read most recently that you would recommend?
Oh man, we have, maybe I can share with you. We have a Epic book club. There's 5 required books for all of our leadership, and there's like 20 others, right? And actually, if they read them and do a book report, we give them additional PTO, which is kind of cool because they're bettering themselves. And we know you work a lot of hours, so it's hard to find time to read a book, and that's the last thing you want to do when you get off at midnight sometimes. But for one, I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan, right? We require Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last and The Infinite Game are some of his books. The current one is reading Jack. It's by Jack Welch, the CEO, previous CEO of General Electric. It's a 13-hour read on Audible and a pretty thick book, but I just got to the second part of the book, and it's on his philosophy, right? You never want to copy someone else's philosophy, but my philosophy is listen to everyone else's philosophy and figure out what hits in the heart, what resonates to you, and put that together. You can't be everything to everybody, right? You have to have what is hard in your heart and live up to that. So it's great hearing other people's journeys to where they got from. He started early and grew his way up to a CEO. So I would recommend that book. And then one, if it's any restaurateurs I'm listening to, is by Will Guidara. He's from the tree of Danny Meyer in New York, who created Shake Shack. His new book that just came out about a year ago is called Unreasonable Hospitality. And I would recommend that book for everybody in the restaurant industry or not.
Yeah, I love Danny Meyer's stuff.
Yeah, great.
So if I had a magic wand and I could improve one area of your business tomorrow, what would it be?
Loaded question. One area of business tomorrow, I would say verification. The restaurant industry and most businesses, right? There's a million different variables going on every single day, and it's hard to figure out how to sometimes sync those together, because a store level's variables are different than their district leader who has 4 stores to look over. So sometimes I mentioned the details, right? Sometimes the details get lost in the sauce or lost in the shuffle because there's so much going on and trying to put out, metaphorically, fires, right? So I'd say the verification of those details. With the tech world, it's getting a little easier. But one thing I would add that's not getting easier for anybody, right, is time management, and figuring out how to properly balance that quality of life for team members, especially in our industry. That's most of the sales are made after 4 p.m., right? And understanding how to get that quality of life. The benefit is we all have the exact same time every day. All humans on this earth have the exact same hours and minutes in a day. How can we train and coach and motivate people to use that time to the best of their ability so that they can fulfill their obligation in this world?
Before I ask my last question, people want to learn more about your restaurants. What are your different websites and social media outlets that they can follow you, learn more about, find locations near them?
Sure. Yeah. So Agave and Rye is our bread and butter, right? So agaveandrye.com. If you want to check out our steakhouse, it's sobsteakhouse.com. Our newest concept, Trashy Dawg, it's just Trashy Dawg, DAWG.com. So those are our 3 websites. All 3 of our concepts have great social media following. It's fun and interactive. So I'd recommend checking that out. And it's just the names I mentioned, just with the @ or the hashtag on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it these days, Snapchat, TikTok, especially.
Great. Want to make it easy for people to find you and follow you and see the menus so they can come visit you. Last question then. What's most inspiring to you today?
I think the most inspiring thing, as I touched on a little bit earlier, right? The world is crazy out there. Always probably will be crazy, right? But I think the most inspiring thing is just seeing other people have a good time, right? And smile and positively impact people's lives. I think if everyone woke up in the morning and said, I'm going to make someone happy today, I'm going to positively inspire someone's life, this world would be a much better place. And that's what we try to do every day. And we do it on an everyday basis, and like understanding that human element, and people are people. Don't get, too worked up about the small things. Each day shall pass and tomorrow's a better day. And it's our job to TLC, right? Train, lead, and coach, and to mentor and develop other people. So it's great to see those grow up within our brand, and then our guests have such an epic experience dining in our restaurants. And that's kind of is the motivation, right? You can inspire others. You can't motivate others, right? You can only be self-motivated. We can inspire them to see their true inner self. And so they become motivated, and seeing people down and listening to you. And then they come back and thank you and say, you're right. That's a great thing to do. And being able to continue to scale, right? And open up our brand in new locations that can't really experience us currently is definitely inspiring. And like I said, that inspire was one of our core values. And our definition of that is to create an environment where our team members, guests, community can mindfully play, right? And by mindfully play, and you go in our restaurants, right? You see all the art and stuff, but that means to be your true authentic self, right? A lot of businesses are too structured and black and white. I should mention the gray area earlier. Some gray area is good, right? Our team has to be able to embody our core values, but that doesn't mean they have to embody every single thing about every single person, right? They can be who they are, who they're meant to be. And with that, good things happen. And that allows the framework to continue where they can make people smile and impact other people's lives.
Thank you so much for sharing. To wrap us up, this has been Chris Britt, Chief Operating Officer of Epic Brands, and with 3 concepts: Agave and Rye, tacos and tequila and bourbon, and the SOB Steakhouse, and then now also Trashy Dawg. Make sure you check them out, and I highly recommend visiting. I'm a big Agave and Rye fan. I'll have to check out the steakhouse, and when you bring Trashy Dawg to Louisville, I'll be first in line as well. So thank you very much for your time today, Chris. Really appreciate you sharing.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.